harder the world, the fiercer the honor.
Let's get on with some Memories of Ice. This is Chapter 8. Let's get it. As usual, we're going to go through the normal chapter stuff, then I will explicitly tell you when to jump out if you're a newbie so that the Malazan veterans and I can nerd out on all the spoilery goodness. But this one starts out with Gethel, and he is basically still reeling from his epic beatdown from Bauchelain, the Grey Sword, who he went to try and recruit over to Hood's side, and he just got the front hand, backhand. But he ultimately gets shunned by Hood because he failed at his job, and I think maybe was reminding Hood how jacked up his face was or whatever, was freaking him out. But so he totally just bugs out and goes into his original warren, which as a Jagat is Omtos Falak, and he comments how, just like the Jagat themselves, this warren is kind of dying off, it's melting, and actually he finds this like chasm with all this rotting, snow or ice and water, and it's actually the Crippled God summoning him to his realm. And so Gethel, being unaffiliated now since Hood kicked him to the curb, decides to go and see what's up. The Crippled God basically clowns him, and he's like, yeah, I'm not going to be the one to help you, Crippled God. He's like, I'm not the weak link. And the Crippled God's like, yeah, you are, and tells him all these ways that he is not good enough and hasn't stacked up and whatever, and ultimately offers him the job of being herald in his new house, this house of chains that he's trying to get into the deck of dragons. And he's like, and there's a king seat, so whoever wants to gun for that. And he's like, oh, you have other people? He's like, yeah, I like my people to be kind of kill or be killed, kind of cutthroat, competing against each other. And he's like, look, the goal is to kill, burn, free these chains. Let's get it. And Gethel does it.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
Then we link back up with our homies in the army camp, and we see that Krup is there, and he's just straight up dominating, kicking everybody's ass in dice. And Quick Ben is super suspicious of him, even though Marulio and Cole are just totally dismissing him as a complete idiot or whatever. Whiskeyjack gets invited though to go sap some beers with Animander Rake, which is how weird and uncomfortable would that be? But he goes there, and Rake kind of talks about how he just instinctively gets people, and he tells a story about how he saved Ganos Perrin from the Hounds of Shadow. Even though, in a lot of ways it didn't matter to him one way or the other. He doesn't know this dude. It's some mortal, whatever. But he just kind of got him and liked him. And it proves that our boy Ganos is straight up legit. Knew it! But then the conversation kind of turns to Quick Ben, and this is why this is one of my favorite chapters, because we get the gift, basically, of hearing Whiskeyjack recount the origin story of the Bridgeburners to Animander Rake. And even though this is the least confusing part of any of the books or whatever, I'm going to take my chance to recount it, because you know what, this is my channel and I love this little segment of the books. And basically what we find out is that Quick Ben was a cadre mage essentially for one of these holy protectors in the Seven Cities, in the city of Erin, which we subsequently know obviously fell and is the subject of Deadhouse Gates and all that stuff. But way back at the very early days during the conquest, the original conquest of Seven Cities, he was a mage for one of these holy Falads with 11 other mages, and obviously Desem goes in there and totally dominates, and they take Aaron, and that's the conquest, obviously, and these 12 mages then have to boogie out, and Whiskeyjack and his squad is the team that Desem assigns to go out and chase after and basically put down these renegade escaped mages who they couldn't capture during the takeover of Aaron, and Callum comes into. I was like choking on beard hair there for a second, but Callum is with them because he is essentially this new Seven Cities claw that Whiskeyjack kind of co-ops to take and help him through Raraku, like just for navigation, not being native to the land. And so they're tracking these mages, and they keep finding these trails of like these desiccated, like Tales from the Crypt style corpses of these mages each time, or as time goes on.
Dang.
We get our first introduction to a young fiddler who rolls up, and he's straight up jacked the helmet of the Holy Falad, and he's just mobbing around with this helmet. He's got his like fiddle on the back. It's actually where he gets the name Fiddler from in the first place, but we get to see a young hedge, a young picker, and they're just like following this trail, and they keep finding these bodies, and it's just going on and on, right? And what should have taken just like, hours or a day at most is like getting stretched out into this like days and weeks long journey, tracking these mages who are just dropping off one by one. And eventually we figure out, right, that it's Quick Ben, and he's absorbing the life forces of all of these other mages, and that him and Callum have really been working together to kind of double cross this squad and then escape off into the sunset on their own the whole entire time. But ultimately, these, the kind of doggedness of the fact that they're pursuing, the fact that Raraku itself seems to have somehow like kind of accepted or blessed or whatever, and just kind of with the dedication and the dignity and what have you, that they've kind of earned their respect, and so instead of remaining enemies or whatever, that they're like, dude, you've earned our respect, we're on board. And that's why the whole like crew is so tight to this day, is because they have this whole kind of like forged in the crucible type of really like intense experience together. Whoa. Kind of in the process of both trying to double cross each other, they somehow like earn each other's respect and have this kind of like profound, deep connection. And actually now, through the process of actually relating this story to Animander Rake, that he and Whiskeyjack now both seem to have kind of this profound connection too, although they're both like super confounded still by Krup. As they're kind of splitting up or whatever, he also says, yo, look, I respect you for, sticking your neck out for Silver Fox. And he's like, yeah, you don't have to worry about that. Silver Fox is going to be cool. And I'll make sure to tell Calor to, keep his hands off. He even tells Corlat, like, yo, if he tries to do anything to Silver Fox, like unleash hell, essentially, unleash the full like might of the Tistandi Kurald Ghislaine war. And she's like, yo, what if we actually like totally destroy the world? That might actually happen. He's like, all right, maybe like tamp it down a little bit.
Just take it easy, champ.
We see the Myrvie, and it's, again, super depressing because she's having this dream that she's all young and normal and doesn't have any of these pains or whatever, and then she, like, wakes up, and obviously that was just a dream, and she's, like, even more super depressed and, just wanting to give up. She walks out into the camp and just kind of is aimlessly wandering, I think, and Krup actually shows up and, again, is trying to, like, help her. He gives her, like, all this copper jewelry, which is supposed to help with your aches and pains and all that, especially this stuff, which is like taken from these barrows that ultimately end up being the gods of the Rivy, right? The Rivy spirits were like real people back in the day, and somehow Krup managed to get his hands on their old copper jewelry, and he gives that to try and like ease the Myrvie's pains and all that stuff.
My man.
And then we end up the scene with Ganos Perrin and his squad, which are now have, basically gone off on their mission, and they've been dropped off by the Quarrels, or they're taking a little pit stop, and the rest of the squad gets informed, like, what they're up to, right? Like, the Trots is gonna go and try and recruit these white-faced Barghast to this greater Panian Daman war by going there and taking on their champion, essentially. And so what's going to happen is that Ganos and Trots are going to push on and try and make that rendezvous ASAP, while Picker and Antsy and those guys are going to stay back and wait for Quick Ben, who's off doing whatever he's doing. And then when he comes back, they're all going to try and re-link up with the main folks and link up with Trots. Quick Ben himself is out, like, doing his investigation of this infection of the Warrens and Chaos and all of that stuff, right? And he goes into Hood's realm, which he says, like, isn't as bad as everywhere else, and he happens on this little stick snare thing, Talmondes, who we find out is one of these Barghast spirits that was trapped in these barrows that were out on the plain with the upside down tree and all of that stuff that we saw a couple of chapters ago when Bauchelain and Gruntle and all of that were out there getting attacked. And he's one of the ones that they freed and then pinned in this kind of Hood's warren. And ultimately he drops some major bombshells that the Barghast actually used to be IMAS, or are the IMAS, basically, and they were like the seafaring IMAS when they were doing the war with the Jagat, and they were out on their boats, like, hunting for Jagat all over, and they were kind of late to the game and didn't make it in time for the ritual, and so they just stayed, like, living IMAS and evolved over the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years to be what we now know as Barghast. And so they've kind of become their whole own species or whatever, and they have all these spirits and whatnot, but they're just like spirits of the land, and they haven't been able to fully ascend to their full, like, godhood or whatever. And that's, like, what he really wants, so that they can, like, have a real, set of gods or whatever, and be like a real full fleshed out people, and not just this kind of stunted noobish civilization of folks who don't know where they come from, etc., etc. And actually what's crazy is that Quick Ben is able to use magic, and again totally trips out this, like, elder spirit thingy by being just so crazy powerful, and actually being able to free him from the runes and the clay that he was stuck in, obviously magically.
Who are you?
So freaking Quick Ben does it again. Don't know how. But yeah, that's about it for Chapter 8. Bail now if you don't want to get into the spoiler-y goodness, because I got a couple things I want to discuss with my vets. First off, dude, total spoiler from Gethel. That whole bit about him being a mirror to Hood, and Hood not wanting to see a Jagat with a totally busted open face and all that stuff. Like, that is funny. Come on. And also, just, like, there's so much foreshadowing in general in this chapter, right? Not just the Hood reveal, but the whole origin story itself, it being in Ruraku, the fact that Ruraku blessed or accepted, or whatever you want to characterize that as, the Bridgeburners, and what it says about just the end of this book, their ascension, and also how kind of interlaced it is with all the Hood stuff. And so the whole thing of them then ultimately becoming the guardians of the bridge to death and all that stuff too. Just a lot of gorgeous layers of foreshadowing for later in this book, and also layers and layers for what ultimately ends up being the super badass thing. Go watch my Hood compassionate video about just how I love what that says about those guys being the gods of death, quote unquote. I also really love that little bit. It's like a short thing, but Crone, I think, says like, yo, aren't you worried about becoming friends with Whiskeyjack? They're just like a human and gonna die off super quick. And he has this whole speech about how you can find like precious value in brevity or something like that. And I just love it too. And I think like, I don't know, it must be weird to be a person who lives forever, right? And what must it be like to kind of there's like no, you know, sense of urgency to do anything. There's no cost to procrastination. If you don't do it now, you can just do it later. There's no like what would be your big drivers and motivations, whereas like, you know, if you know you only got 50 or 60 years or whatever, you want to like burn bright and make the most of it, right? And you burn hot and fast or whatever the right analogy would be there. And I think that he kind of sees the value in these lives that are so quick and striving for something, right? And they're motivated, and you can kind of see that Whiskeyjack wants to do the right thing. He wants to, like, you know, for whatever the reason is, you know, he's doing the right thing, and he can kind of respect that and in some ways maybe even like envy it, right? Because they have this like extra kick in the pants to kind of you know, attack life with ferocity or whatever that maybe, especially as people don't have, but maybe he himself might not even, you know, or might struggle with, right? That like, how do you motivate to do something now when you could always just do it later? There's lots of really good foreshadowing about like the Beast Hold and getting its new masters in the Myrvie dream, and I also just love the Krup stuff in here, dude. He's such a dude, right? Like you never know whether he's like this, you know, psychotic idiot or like eccentric genius. And I, you know, you obviously know I'm a huge Krup fan, but just dude, the feels, and like he had to do this thing with Krull and it inadvertently totally screws over the Myrvie, and he even though he plays it dumb and aloof and like, you know, bumbling idiot, he's, you know, out there like kind of engineering ways to improve her life and to make amends and to, you know, do good and right, and just, you know, all the stuff that Krup does is, I think, always so well intended, saving his friends, saving his city, saving the world, you know, hey, Team Krup. And I also love the stuff at the end of the chapter, which is just fleeting as well, where it's Ganos talking about how, you know, what do you do as a soldier when you're going to get forced retired or whatever, and like how do you go back, you know, what kind of life can a soldier have after they, you know, risked everything and seen everything, and then like try and go back and punch a time card and like you know, put widgets together in the factory or whatever the stupid thing is, like, you know, having seen what you've seen, given what you've given, and lost all that. It's kind of like that, there was like a sequel to the Band of Brothers where it was the Pacific Theater shows, and that kind of, they show that, right, where the main character then goes back and he like tries to go to college, and I think he does end up going to college and gets his degree and all that stuff, but it was just like that initial part where it's like he's, you know, just sitting in classes like eating sack lunch and like sandwiches that are wrapped in foil after you know, everything that you see in the preceding you know, months and years of his tour of duty. And yeah, gosh, that you know, I don't know what that's like, but that spoke to me, and you can kind of, you know, get a sense, at least, you know, hypothetically, of just how powerful that kind of stuff is. And that's, again, another huge reason why I love and appreciate these books. So yeah, I'll leave it there. I know it was a short chapter and I went on and on with all the spoilers, but I really enjoyed this one. So I hope you enjoyed it too. If you do, like it, subscribe it, put a ring on it, merch it, whatever, Discord for sure. And until the next one, happy reading.